Kicking off the list at number 10, Marvel Zombies. Arguably one of the nastiest alternate universes there is that of Marvel Zombies. We have all of our beloved heroes just going crazy and trying to eat everybody. This 5-issue story is beautifully drawn. We have the work of Sean Phillips tell this dark, gruesome 2005 one-shot written by Robert Kirkman. And if you like this storyline, you'll love Marvel Zombies Return, which was released just a few years later, written by Fred Van Kent and David Wellington. And of course still has the beautifully gory illustrations. Now in this series we find our Charles Xavier, and he's helping the zombie gang find dinner. That's right, his brain is actually connected to Cerebro, so he can locate any remaining human beings. So don't even think about hiding under your bed and calling it a day. And before we continue, if you haven't done so already, make sure you give this video a nice thumbs up, because it sure does help us out here at the studio in our secret underground base of operations. It's this one here. Thank you. Okay, and back to Charles the Juggernaut. Number 9, Juggernaut. Next on our list, we're checking out What If Volume 2, Issue 13, where Professor X becomes, well, the Juggernaut. Yeah, what a combo, right? So in this Earth 905, we find Charles as the one who became the Juggernaut, and it's super fun. Now of course that means that Charles Jughead over here never formed the X-Men, so Magneto is doing the big bad. That is, until Xavier digs his way out of the collapsed cave. Professor X plus the look and power of Juggernaut, I mean, that's pretty badass. He straight up threatens Spider-Man by telling him to stay out of mutant affairs. Peter Parker, or your aunt will be told of your secret. Now, as far as threats go, it's not bad at all. Getting in your head while looking like that, you win, buddy. I won't even fight you. Then near the end of the issue, we see Charles fully embracing the large life, yelling about how nobody disobeys the Juggernaut. And it's damn frightening to see this guy mid-sprint, I'll tell you that. Do not want to be in the way of him. And coming in at number 8, Fascist Xavier. Taking place on Earth 13410, we find Charles as the founding leader of the British Union of Fascists. That's right, taking place in Extreme X-Men Volume 2, Issue 10, Xavier swore to save his country from depression and invasion. So he created an alliance with Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, and Tojo. So this issue is pretty ambitious, to say the least. Like, even the cover page, like, holy shit. It picks up halfway across the multiverse. Xavier rules over all of the people of this world, and it's grim. He makes this big reveal and he looks like this big wizard. It's wild. He's like, I considered killing you and your friends, but I kind of like your face, so all good. Safe to say that any type of X-Men as a Nazi is definitely gonna get a spot on a dark alternate version list. That's almost a given, especially when you kill Captain America. Come on. And number 7, King Charles I. Taking place in Marvel 1602, released back in 2003, we see quite the spin on our common supers. Dr. Doom is referred to as Count Otto von Doom. Already this issue rocks. This Elizabethan era superhero story written by Neil Gaiman featured Carlos Xavier as a witch breed. Yeah, which was their way of explaining mutants back in the candlelit days. They of course have the same school to train others with extraordinary abilities, but this time it's all considered witchcraft. I feel like if David Blaine went back in time for like 1 minute, he would be burned at the stake. He'd be like, is this your card? And they're like, yes it is. Bye. This issue is quite wordy. It feels and sounds like Game of Thrones. There's a lot of whisper planning, you know? It starts with Sir Nicholas Fury and a handwritten note that makes the readers do this. Like, the handwriting's a bit too old, you know? But it's nice. It's definitely a old vibe. So if the cold Elizabethan vibe is up your alley, you know where to go. Number 6, Xavier the Wizard. Making his first debut in Uncanny X-Men 153, this version of Charles might be one of my favorites on the list. The issue opens up with Kitty Pryde reading a bedtime story to Ileana, and the front of the story sees it titled Kitty's Fairy Tale. How fun. We see our main players and their respective roles. Charles with the new alias, the Wizard. And I love his new look. Anything with wizards, I'm sold. Now, it's a children's story, so it's not too dark, but it's insane to leave this out. So, in this fairy tale, we have the Dark Phoenix as the destroyer, the chaos, the ravager of worlds. And she's just destroying everything. And then all of a sudden, our trusty Xavier the Whiz Kid comes in and traps Jean Grey's soul in an orb, her true self. The wizard goes on to explain that this crystal is the only weapon capable of destroying the Dark Phoenix. And you bet it worked like a charm, literally, because, you know, wizards and stuff. And number 5. bad baby. We find this version of Charles much younger. Taking place in the new X-Men issue 121, we find Charles as a baby in utero. Now, this may seem like a timeout zone, you know? Like, nothing malicious should happen before you're born. Like, at least wait until you see the world. Get a glimpse for it. Maybe check it out for a day and then go from there. We see Cassandra Nova, Professor X's twin sister, in there with him. And we watch the two being biologically conceived. And as they grow, we see baby Charles make his way over, and he senses the evil from his twin, and then he starts just like punching her in the face. Yeah, you just slowly see him drift over and just bam, just deck her. And then if that isn't bad enough, he wraps the umbilical cord around her neck, and then that doesn't work, so he uses his damn psychic powers to kill Cassandra. This is for sure on the list. This should be on every list. This is crazy. I don't care how evil she was. These pages are a wild sight to see. It's a baby! I'll move on. And number 4, President X. Now I think is the perfect time to reflect on past presidents. So at Top 10 Nerd, we of course have to include President X. Making his rounds in Ruins issue 1 back in 1995 miniseries, we have Charles Xavier as the president. Sounds cool, it's not. He's been elected and he moved into the White House. Well, rather, he moved the White House to Westchester. Yeah, he moved it from Washington because he's cool like that, you know? This is a dark tale. The illustrations are done really well by Cliff and Therese Nielsen. So Warren Ellis wrote this idea that the X-Men hadn't formed, and rather Charles was locking up certain X-Men characters in a Texan prison. But don't worry, he still visits them, you know, just to make sure they're still being tortured and all. And number 3, Lord Xavier, also known as the Witch King. Volume 2, Issue 9, Extreme X-Men. The Witch King ruled over Genosha and sports a look that probably takes the cake. I mean, come on, this is just badass. He has an army of orcs and beasts on top of his already spectacular abilities. In this issue, we also see a few upgrades to the Professor, like concussive energy blast, for example. In the opening of the story, we see him effortlessly take down invaders with machines. So it doesn't matter how you roll up to this fight. If you want to roll up in a car, maybe a helicarrier, whatever the case, Lord Xavier will laugh as he showcases just how powerful he can be. And number 2, X-Men Noir. One of my favorites, released back in 2008, X-Men Noir issue 1 gave us a gothic dark version of the Prof. Taking place on Earth 90214, Charles is a psychiatrist who runs the Xavier School. Only this school is for exceptionally wayward youth, and rather a home to juvenile delinquents. So Charles' role in all this? Well, he trains them to become better criminals, that is. Yeah, after the death of one of his students, Warren Worthington III, due to his teaching methods, Charles was arrested and incarcerated in Rikers Island. I always loved the noir theme. Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was such a nice touch. Love that depressing black and white vibe mixed in there, you know? I feel like Nickelback should be playing the whole time you read these comics, definitely. Just in the background, just very low. And finally, coming in at number 1, Logan. Released in 2017, this R-rated Wolverine flick showed us just how dark the superhero game can get. After the success of Deadpool, Fox decided to take Wolverine out with a long, sad bang. And if you haven't seen it, it's brilliant. James Mangold did a really good job on this one. The year is 2028 and Wolverine and Xavier are not in the best shape. Logan's healing ability is dwindling and Charles suffers from seizures. This is a very dark X-Men story, so the Westchester incident is referred to numerous times in this flick. And in this movie, it was when Charles had a seizure that ended up killing 600 people, including a good number of X-Men. So it's a really good sequence where he has a seizure near a casino, and let me tell you, that's one of the most tense scenes in a superhero movie I've ever seen. Not even just saying this, I talk about the scene often. His brain is considered a weapon of mass destruction, and you'll see why. So Charles and Logan, or rather, Logan, as he says it 900 times in the movie, they're trying to lay low and keep each other safe, with the help of Caliban, of course.
Coming in at number 10, we have the bloodthirsty Vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bidden and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 9, we have the evil Iceman hailing from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of Iceman, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantaneously through water. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside of a furnace. Which I guess is one way to kill an ice-based villain, but geez, that's a little bit overkill. Coming in at number 8, we have the Brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel Universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 7, we have the possessed Shadow Professor X from Earth 6141. Isn't that a mouthful? During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind throughout the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes. Coming in at number 5, we have the group known as Sinister Six, and surprisingly, this isn't just a bunch of Spider-Man villains. A group of 6 red-eyed clones of the X-Men working for Mr. Sinister, this villainous group did have a few run-ins with the Wallcrawler, but only during the series known as Spider-Man and the X-Men, so it all works out. These evil clones were initially an intense obstacle preventing the real X-Men from getting closer to Mr. Sinister's schemes, but would ironically eventually be defeated by the same condition that seems to always follow Spider-Man related clone stories: cellular degeneration. Better luck next time, Sinister Six. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, aka Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men have ever had to face. Coming in at number 2, we have one of the most powerful enemies the X-Men have ever seen with Brother Mutant. On Earth 127, a male variant of the Scarlet Witch, known as the Scarlet Warlock, attempted to cast a spell that would transfer Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to Magneto, thus giving Magneto an incredible power boost given his magnetic abilities. However, something with the spell went wrong, and the Scarlet Warlock, Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, and the villain Mesmero were all merged into a singular being known as Brother Mutant. With all 5 of these mutants' powers combined into one villainous figure, Brother Mutant was such a powerful threat that a multiversal team of Wolverines had to be assembled specifically to stop him, just to ensure that all of that power wasn't unleashed on the rest of the Marvel multiverse. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Unlike a lot of the other entries on this list, this Magneto variant doesn't have any additional powers or physical mutations to make him even more intimidating, but rather is terrifying just because of his sheer willpower. This version of Magneto is much more cynical and dark than the complex figure of the regular Marvel Universe, and when he believed his children had been killed by Doctor Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. Switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally able to be stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast to the head.
Number 10. Armor. Armor, aka Hisako Ichiki, is actually a pretty powerful X-Men, even in the 616 universe, who can create a psionic exoskeleton suit of armor. This exoskeleton is incredibly strong, durable, impenetrable, and it's fueled by energy from Hisako's ancestors in the 616 universe. But not in the Ultimate Universe, no sir. In this universe, Armor's exoskeleton takes the shape of giant animals and even dragons sometimes. Oh, and also in 1610, her exoskeleton is fueled by 10,000 mythological Japanese spirit demons. Like, how freaking awesome is that? Armor is cool and powerful enough that when the Ultimate Universe was destroyed, she was able to slip her way into the 616 Prime Universe, until she was kidnapped by Miss Sinister and eventually lost her life in X-Men Blue number 28 in 2018. Number 8. It's Wolverine. I'm gonna be honest, this version of Wolverine is a bit alarming in terms of his morals and preferences, and just his behavior in general is just a bit less heroic than his 616 counterpart. But despite that, it is hard not to admit that he is quite the powerful character. His healing factor is a bit different than his Prime version and is called a survival factor. That means he can survive being torn in half, departed from his head, and even blown up by a nuclear bomb. He can also detect lies and still has an adamantium skeleton. He was trained by Weapon X as an emotionless assassin, but when the Brotherhood hired him to take out Xavier, he proves he is more than just muscle, overcoming his brainwashing and joining the X-Men, although it may have also been because he fell in love with the teenage Jean Grey when he was like 30. Number 6. The Phoenix 5. In the 2012 crossover event Avengers vs. X-Men, the Cosmic Phoenix Force was coming to Earth, and when it arrived, it was split up into 5, giving our heroes a new problem in the form of the Phoenix 5. The quintet consisted of X-Men veterans including Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magic, and Colossus, who began reshaping the world according to their will until they themselves became a threat. As each member of the 5 fell, those left standing got more and more powerful, leaving Scott and Emma, who were becoming more tyrannical by the minute. To stop the two of them, Professor X was recruited by Magneto, but the cosmic entity had consumed Scott and even basically made him betray Emma Frost to gain more power. After a mental battle between him and Xavier, Scott used his power to actually take the life of his father figure, mentor, and dear friend, becoming the Dark Phoenix until he was defeated by Hope Summers and Scarlet Witch. And at number 5 is X-Force. X-Force. The X-Men Black Ops team. Cyclops' own little hit squad. There are more than a few not so great things this sub-team has done. Cyclops forcing X-23 to be on the team, performing assassinations, etc, etc. It's all bad. But after Cyclops disbanded the team, Wolverine kept it going on his own, and they took on a bit of a sinister task when they decided to take out a younger cloned version of Apocalypse to prevent him becoming a threat. This particular assassination almost didn't go through, but then Phantom X just popped the little clone in the head. Yes, it's incredibly messed up, but hey, then he cloned the clone and raised it in a virtual reality to give it all the nurturing it needed to be a good Apocalypse. Number 4. Professor X Mindwipe. Professor X has a history of just impulsively wiping and manipulating people's minds, which never goes well in the long run, but for some reason, he just keeps doing it, even to those he considers friends and colleagues. Reed Richards, with whom Xavier worked with on the Illuminati, which is a whole other bad time, feared for his son's life and built a machine that would take away a mutant's powers. Reed's son, Franklin Richards, is an incredibly powerful being with reality warping abilities and was believed to be a mutant, which he wasn't, but that's another story. Professor X took exception to the machine that Reed built, so he completely wiped away the knowledge of the machine from Richards' mind. He made sure that Richards would never be able to build another one ever again, tampering with the mind of a man he used to call a friend. Number 3. Iceman. In the 616 reality, Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, was one of the original X-Men and has achieved the classification of Omega level with his powers of cryokinesis and hydrokinesis. Now, in the Earth 1610 reality, he is actually one of the youngest members of the group, and it's almost as if he was kind of given a power boost. I know that doesn't make sense. How can you like boost an Omega level character? You can't. But he wields his powers in more interesting ways. He has always been able to transform his body, but he also creates gigantic ice trolls and ice walls. He's proven his worth by stopping a Weapon X invasion and the Ultimates all on his own. Professor Xavier himself has claimed that Iceman is one of the 3 most powerful X-Men, and he's probably not wrong. But I do gotta say, I don't know what they were thinking giving him the do-rag. I don't get it. And number 1, it's Jean Grey. Did you think it was gonna be anyone else? As an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic, she is already a pretty tough character to take on. But as almost all of us know, Jean Grey is the host for the Phoenix Force, and that still remains the case here on Earth 1610. Only, she seems to use even more of that power. Unleashing a small fraction of her power melted the armor of Apocalypse, but her full might against him tore him apart atom by atom, causing him so much pain Apocalypse begged her to stop. Apocalypse begged her to stop. As the Phoenix, she reversed time, read people's minds, saved the whole team multiple times, and took off into space, literally traveling to what was essentially heaven. There is a reason people fear Jean Grey, and the Phoenix Force gives them all the more reason to poop their pants.
Number 10. Azure Nightcrawler. In Marvel's Mangaverse, X-Men, we meet Azure Nightcrawler. In this world, he's a mutant criminal affiliated with the Azure, a team of blue-skinned evil mutants including Beast and Mystique. This version of Nightcrawler is even more demon-like than usual and wears some intimidating red ninja armor. He battles against Wolverine and Moonstar, confronting them while they're searching for Rogue. Surprisingly, he holds his own well against them until Cyclops arrives. He's eventually defeated at the hands of Wolverine, who brutally cuts off his tail and later impales Nightcrawler's head with his claws. Number 9. Prisoner Nightcrawler. In Ruins Volume 1, published in 1995, we follow the story of reporter Philip Sheldon infected with a virus as he travels around a horribly warped and twisted world, interviewing heroes and famous figures and trying to figure out what went wrong in this universe. During the story, Sheldon visits a special prison containing several heroes including some of the X-Men, with Wilson Fisk acting as the prison warden. The prisoners are deformed and tortured from their captors' efforts to control their powers, and in one of the prison cells, we see Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler, reduced to a frail gray creature covered in filth. We see him locked away and cannibalizing his own tail. Pretty dark. Number 8. Alpha Nightcrawler. First appearing in X-Men Alpha number 1 in 1995, this version of Nightcrawler had a traumatic experience that caused him to despise religion, unlike his counterpart from the Prime Marvel universe. Professor X dies in this universe, and Nightcrawler joins Magneto's X-Men to stop Apocalypse from dominating the world. This version of Nightcrawler has some pretty dark moments, including killing Deadpool by teleporting his head off and nearly taking down Wolverine in a one-on-one showdown. Eventually, he meets a real hero's death, sacrificing himself to imprison the exterminators in another universe. Number 7. Darkcrawler. In Incredible Hulk number 126 from 1970, we meet Nightcrawler, Chunky Edition. Darkcrawler is an ancient enemy of the Undying Ones, demons who ruled the Earth thousands of years ago. They once sent the Hulk after him, and in the battle that followed, Darkcrawler's big scepter was broken, and he was pulled into the Undying One's dimension. There, he defeated the Undying Ones and their leader, the Nameless One. Nightcrawler then became their new leader and earned the title Darkcrawler. His deadly scepter of shadow and creepy red eyes make him a sinister dark counterpart to Nightcrawler, landing at number 7 on our list. Number 6. Egyptia. This version of Nightcrawler, found in Secret Wars Journal number 1, was part of a plot to overthrow the Barris Khonshu of Egyptia. This Nightcrawler is almost ape-like, like an Egyptian monkey samurai version of Nightcrawler. During the showdown, Spectre, aka Moon Knight, shows up and warns the rebels that the Baroness is indeed a goddess and her curfew exists for their own good. Spectre then transforms as a pack of man-wolves appear and charge the heroes,
killing this super cool version of Nightcrawler. He's kind of like a side character in this story. Number 5. German Nightcrawler. In Marvel's Excalibur, published in 1989, we meet a version of Nightcrawler from a universe where, in World War II, the German forces were victorious. In this world, Nightcrawler is a member of the super team Lightning Force. He once squared off against the normal Nightcrawler from the Marvel Prime universe, Earth 616, teleporting him around multiple times and then mocking him after he passed out, calling him an inferior specimen. This version of Nightcrawler has longer, sharper nails and a sharp outfit to match. He's even got a sweet pair of shades like any dark version of a character should. Number 4. The Demon. Appearing in X-Men Noir, Mark of Cain, this Nightcrawler is a dark one indeed. Recruited by a German government agency known as Weapon X, he was put to work kidnapping an American spy known as the Mimic in exchange for his freedom. Also known as the Demon, he tends to speak in sermons like a priest and wears a super creepy devil mask to hide his hideous burnt face. Coming from X-Men Noir, it's no surprise that this version of Nightcrawler is so dark. And if you like this list, I definitely recommend checking out X-Men Noir for yourself. And I definitely recommend hitting like on this video. Number 3. Zombie Nightcrawler. First appearing in Marvel Apes Primate Special, this version of Nightcrawler is, well, a zombie. In the Primate Special, there's a whole universe full of hilarious alternate versions of Marvel heroes that are apes, with names like Spider Monkey and the Silverback Surfer. In Volume 1, we see Tony Stark and the Hulk have similar visions in which they see the ape world invaded by zombie versions of Marvel characters, including a crazed looking zombie Nightcrawler seen attacking an ape version of the Scarlet Witch. It's bizarre and it's dark. Number 2. House of M. First appearing in Marvel's House of M event, this Nightcrawler grew up in hiding with his mother Mystique, later becoming a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. in Magneto's mutant run world. Later, he joins Wolverine's special team known as the Red Guard, and he has a pretty lengthy character arc that sort of mirrors the Prime Universe Nightcrawler in some interesting ways. Regardless, he eventually finds himself banished to the Deadlands and is eventually killed by a group of zombies, meeting a surprisingly dark end. And now, number 1, Banff Dragon. In Marvel's Inferno, released in 2015, we meet what is possibly the darkest version of Nightcrawler yet. His mother was a shape-shifting villain, and his father was a half-demon. Fighting alongside Cyclops and Colossus, Nightcrawler regularly helps a team teleport to the Inferno, also known as Limbo or Battleworld, in efforts to rescue Colossus' sister Illyana. During the 5th of these yearly showdowns, these attempted rescues, Nightcrawler is captured and tortured, and his soul becomes corrupted, turning him into a demon. Specifically, he becomes what Scott Summers refers to as Banff Dragon, or is that an acronym? Anyways, he winds up causing the X-Men to lose ground. Teleporting inside the X-Men's force field, he helps kill Beast and Doctor Strange. This allows a horde of Inferno's demons to enter into Manhattan, and we see Dragon Nightcrawler wandering the streets as the demon horde rampages through the city. Now that is dark.
Coming in at number 10, we've got a video game honorable mention with the Wolverine symbiote from the game Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. In this title's storyline, Wolverine has traveled to New York City to deal with a growing symbiote infestation, and even briefly fights Spider-Man when he believes the wall crawler is actually Venom. Unfortunately for Wolverine, he finds himself overwhelmed by actual symbiotes on top of a church and attacks Spider-Man again as the Wolverine symbiote. With all of his usual healing abilities on top of all the symbiote enhancements that the alien parasites offer, this version of Wolverine might just be one of the grossest versions we've ever gotten to see. Coming in at number 8, we've got a live-action detour with X-24 from the 2017 film Logan. An allegedly perfect clone of Wolverine, but with none of the compassion or humanity, X-24 was treated like an attack dog and followed the orders of Xander Rice to hunt down and capture the real Wolverine and the young mutant girl he was protecting. Based on Wolverine during his prime years, he was able to physically overcome the true Wolverine and was only able to be defeated at the last minute by a bullet made of pure adamantium right to the skull. Coming in at number 7, we have Basilisk, the twisted, mask-wearing variant of Cyclops. On an alternate world where anti-mutant sentiment is somehow even higher than the regular Marvel universe, Scott Summers' backstory is made even more tragic. Killing 7 people, including his own parents when his powers first manifest, Cyclops is locked away in the prison Alcatraz and forced to wear a mask made of ruby quartz to control his laser vision. The evil governor of the prison even goes so far as to mutilate Cyclops and remove his eyelids, making the twisted Basilisk mask the only method Scott has to control his deadly abilities. A favor that Cyclops would repay by killing the governor and launching a prison break that would eventually lead him back to this universe's X-Men. Coming in at number 5, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man. Multiple Man's powers have always been a bit overwhelming, with the ability to seemingly create an unlimited amount of duplicates of himself as long as they're generated one at a time. In the Ultimate Universe, however, this power was pushed beyond its limits when Jamie allied himself with the Brotherhood of Mutants and created tens of thousands of bomb-wielding versions of himself with no regard for his own life. While the Ultimatum event featured many shocking moments, few are as existentially disturbing as literal thousands of clones strapping explosives to themselves just to wipe out several superhero bases. Coming in at number 4, we have the possessed Professor X from Earth 6141. During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind through the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes. While eventually defeated by the team known as New Excalibur, this group of Shadow X-Men left their world shaking in terror. Coming in at number 3, we have Hydra Wolverine. Hailing from the reality known as Earth 1720, this version of Wolverine is fully committed to the evil ideology of the organization Hydra, complete with a new green and yellow color scheme to his costume. Married to this universe's version of the Invisible Woman, who also happens to be this universe's version of Madam Hydra, this Wolverine was apparently successful in conquering his home reality along with his lover, and has since begun to travel the multiverse searching for more worlds to destroy in the universe's most twisted romantic honeymoon. Luckily for the Marvel multiverse, this Wolverine would be defeated by a variant of Kitty Pryde and the rest of the Exiles, who wound up tricking him into stabbing himself with his own adamantium claws. Better luck next time, Hydra. Coming in at number 2, we have the Wolverine from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In an alternate world where Charles Xavier is dead and Magneto is leader of the X-Men, Wolverine is a brutal warrior named Weapon X who has to be constantly subdued by the psychic abilities of Jean Grey in order to be a functioning member of the X-Men team. Eventually losing a hand while going on a suicide mission to rescue this version of Jean from a version of Cyclops, this version of Wolverine for a time had heroic ambitions, but gave them up after being granted the power of the Celestials and turned into Weapon Omega, now determined to bring about the evolutionary future that he'd initially stopped the mutant apocalypse from achieving and declaring war against all of humanity. This new Weapon Omega is the farthest thing possible from Wolverine's usual heroics.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Blob. Fred Dukes, aka Blob, made his comic book debut back in Uncanny X-Men issue 3, and he got his powers when he was just a young man. He often looked at himself as this extra super strong freak of nature at this point, just this giant strong man whose temper often got the best of him. The X-Men met him at a carnival where he was using his might and muscle just to get by. And then when Scott Summers approached Blob and asked if he'd heard about the X-Men, he responds with, "Oh, those jerky juveniles in the corny costumes? Yeah, I've heard of those guys." First of all, rude. So he goes back and Charles has him tested. He has him pulling these massive chains so hard that he breaks these chains like King Kong. And then he starts to make a break for it, launching away any X-Men member in his path. So now he's gone, but now he knows everybody's real identity because he was there for a bit. And then he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm out of here. So Charles had to track him down and then erase his memory from his brain. I had to start with Blob because he was so close to being a member. So much potential, and then he ended up picking the wrong team 3 issues later. But we had him, We had him for a bit. And before we continue on with this list, if you guys haven't already, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up because it helps our channel out so much. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to our list. Number 9, Vulcan. He named himself after the Roman god of fire, but Vulcan's real identity was that of Gabriel Summers. He was born after Cyclops and Havoc. Well, not really born, he was surgically removed from his mother's body and placed in an incubator accelerator, aged to be at his prime, and then sent back to Earth to work for Divan Shikari. He then escaped and was found by Moira McTaggart with no memories of who he is or where he came from. He was impressing Charles quite a bit, and all he wanted to do was learn his mutant abilities. Sounds like the dream student. So Charles needed help from him and other newcomers to find the remaining X-Men after most of them had been depowered from the Scarlet Witch. So Charles put him in this danger room purely made of Charles' thoughts as a training exercise to get them sharp in a short amount of time. So inside it feels like months of training, but in actuality it's only a few hours. Then Vulcan and his new team were sent to Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men. But Vulcan revealed to Scott that Xavier sacrificed his own brother to save him. And then Kid Vulcan's true origins are shown, and in the next issue of Deadly Genesis, he's unleashed. Number 8, Frenzy. Joanna Cargill made her first comic book debut in X-Factor issue 4, when she accidentally punched her father so hard that her hand went through his chest. Now her father was by no means a good person at all, but I mean doesn't mean he deserved to go out like that. Plus finding out you're a mutant at that time in that way must have been pretty traumatizing. She became known as Frenzy and she joined the Allegiance of Evil. After the Acolytes disbanded, Joanna became an ambassador for Genosha and stood by Magneto until she was captured by the US government in order to learn more about Magneto. But she didn't talk. She kept her mouth shut until Jean Grey entered and freed her, giving her the option to join the X-Men the easy way or the hard way. Jean used the hard way, and then Frenzy's entire attitude was changed, just like that. Her brain was different. Now her personality was campy, it was awkward, and not nearly as confident as before. But she did help the X-Men find Magneto's base. She was a team member, even if it was forced and awkward. After Magneto's defeat, her mind control was released and she rejoined the Acolytes and left the X-Mansion. Again, a little brief, but it still counts.
Number 7, Psylocke. Colonel Betsy Braddock of Strike is England's most powerful telepath, capable of reading minds, creating psychic grenades that explode in the minds of others, and one of her coolest powers, brandishing a purple psychic energy blade. She was once possessed by the mutant David Xavier, but she was strong enough to overpower him momentarily, which, if you know anything about him and his level of power, is not something to scoff at. When Colossus dropped a car on her, her consciousness was powerful enough to jump into the body of a coma patient named Quanon, kind of calling back to how Betsy and Quanon share a connection in the main 616 universe. Number 6, Rogue. Similar to her Prime Universe version, Rogue, or Marion Carlisle, drains the life force and absorbs the memories and abilities of others through skin-to-skin contact, with the caveat being that she can end someone's life if she holds on too long. Now, in the Ultimate Universe, it turns out doing this on a mutant to the point of hitting the end of the line will actually permanently transfer those powers over to Rogue. This happened twice. The first time was with Gambit. She drained his life force when he was already near the end after a fight with the mutant Juggernaut, and she gained his kinetic energy manipulation abilities, plus sometimes his accent. The second time she did this, she drained the powers of Juggernaut himself when he was near death, gaining his abilities permanently, giving her the strength to throw cars, the durability to withstand demolishing buildings, super speed, and limitless stamina. She would use those abilities to help the X-Men. Number 5, Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde, as we know her, is known for her ability to phase herself and others through solid matter. She also has the ability on Earth 1610, but in this universe she discovered she can also minimize the negative space around her atoms, becoming super dense and granting herself extra dimensional mass, giving her enough strength to smash through concrete and metal and punch Spider-Man through the air, making her as hard as diamond and able to withstand attacks from the Phoenix, and making herself weigh 90 tons at peak mass. But that's as well as her phasing ability, which can allow her to walk on air and water. And that's before her exposure to Giant Man Serum to fight Galactus that leveled her up even more, allowing her to increase in size and gain a healing factor. Definitely one of my favorite Ultimate X-Men, and not just because of her romance with Peter Parker. Alright, number 4, Storm. The Omega level mutant known as Storm has a little bit of a different backstory compared to her main universe counterpart. On 1610, Aurora Monroe was an immigrant from Morocco who was found by Professor X living in Athens, Texas, where she'd been stealing cars for a living. When she took a 1978 Mustang for a joyride, the police finally caught up with her and Aurora used her powers to create a lightning storm to escape. Unlike her main universe counterpart though, she didn't have the training yet to control her powers to such a high degree and put some children in danger when she summoned the lightning storm, which eventually allowed the police to catch her. Xavier sent Jean Grey to convince the Athens authorities that Aurora was actually an FBI agent and that she was sent to relieve them of the mutant, and she went on to join the X-Men. She is much more sarcastic and rebellious and also had relationships with both Beast and Wolverine. She didn't just create storms, she created drama.
Finally, number 1, Deadpool. Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. It's such a blast to read and I had to include it in here because it's so good. It's so Deadpool. The issue was released in August 2012 and just the front cover, you know what you're getting into. So what's the story here? What are we getting into? What happened to Wade? Well, his mouth wasn't sewn shut and he didn't have swords for hands, nothing like that this time, no. The X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to heal his insanity. The doctor, Psycho Man, was brainwashing Wade's in hopes to shut down all of his inner voices, which worked, but now all these voices were replaced with voices that were encouraging him to kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. So it went from bad to worse, and of course Wade's the one to do it. Right off the bat, the series draws you in. I mean, it opens with the Fantastic Four facing off with Wade. Reed gets left all rubbery and left for dead and lifeless. It's really gruesome, but also really fun. Not for the faint of heart, but definitely fun, and obviously super gory.
Number 10, Chief Magnus. In the Noiroverse, the reality of Earth 90214, Eric Magnus is one of the worst kind of villains, and he doesn't even have any powers here. Much like how Spider-Man has a noir version of that comic, so does the X-Men. In the comic series X-Men Noir, we meet Chief of the NYPD detectives, Eric Magnus, a crooked cop who aims to protect his family through using his power to control the criminal world, creating his own underworld society known as the Brotherhood. He attempts to encourage Charles Xavier to partner with him. Xavier runs a school for wayward youth, and Magnus would see them given a place in the criminal world via the Brotherhood. When Charles refuses, Magnus has one of his students killed. Number 9, Grand Inquisitor Enrique. Obviously, we have to talk about the dark alternate reality that is Neil Gaiman's 1602. Here, Magneto is known as Enrique, who was a young Jewish boy in Venice who was separated from his family and baptized by a priest and raised by the Catholic Church, forbidden from ever returning to his family again. He would go on to become the Grand Inquisitor, responsible for searching out, hunting down, and eliminating the witch breed, which in 1602 speak is another word for mutant. Enrique was forced to burn alive witch breed with visible mutations at the stake, despite being one himself, and really wanting to not do that. Number 8, Earth X. On the alternate reality of Earth 9997, which comes to us from the Earth X series, Magneto ends up as Toad's slave after being originally proclaimed a hero. In this reality, Magneto defeats all the Sentinels and rules in the newly formed Sentinel City thereafter. He invites Toad to join him, but Toad secretly resents Magneto for all the years of mistreatment he has suffered while under his leadership. When the vibranium levels in the Earth change, however, Magneto finds his powers have altered. In fact, Toad seems to have inherited his powerful magnetic abilities somehow due to this change, and Magneto is left depowered. Toad then enslaves Magneto for a time, and Magneto is forced to become Toad's jester. Both funny and dark. It's funny dark. Dark humor. Number 7, the Chaos Engine Trilogy. The Chaos Engine Trilogy is an X-Men novel that is a collection of 3 stories which explore alternate realities where 3 iconic Marvel villains use the Cosmic Cube in order to manipulate the world, finalizing their plans for world domination and shaping the world in their own image. Magneto himself is one of those iconic villains and is featured in the 2nd book. The X-Men must fight to stop Magneto from enacting a plan which would result in worldwide mass murder, allowing Magneto to finally assert his dominance over the humans who have long toiled to oppress mutant kind. Of course, this is the sort of thing Magneto is usually plotting as a villain, but this time around he has the power of the Cosmic Cube to back him up, making this version of him even more frightening. Number 6. Age of Apocalypse. While the alternate version of Magneto in AOA got a few nice moments in this reality, he also had some pretty dark ones. In AOA, Magneto leads the X-Men, as Charles Xavier is killed when he sacrifices himself to protect Eric. Magneto and his X-Men are forced to face Apocalypse, who rules as a powerful tyrant, eliminating the weak and experimenting on others to create the strongest version of Mutant. Magneto loses both of his children, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, in battle in this reality, and also ends up locking himself up in prison after Apocalypse is defeated due to it being revealed that he withheld information from the rest of the X-Men and the new mutant branch of government. However, this is also the reality where he finds love with fellow mutant Rogue. The two of them even have a child together. In the end, however, both he and Rogue are brutally murdered by the AOA version of Logan, Weapon X, who later betrays the X-Men by becoming the new Apocalypse. Number 5. Big Town. During a Fantastic Four What If miniseries entitled Big Town, Magneto appears as one of the villains teamed up to take down enemy Reed Richards. The crazy thing about this story and this alternate Magneto of Earth 110 is that he doesn't attempt to take out Mr. Fantastic alone. He is joined by Hulk, Namor, Doctor Doom, Ultron, of course his own Brotherhood of Mutants, which this time around includes Storm and Wolverine, surprisingly, and Red Skull. Yep, Magneto has been established as a Holocaust survivor, which granted could not be true in this alternate reality, we don't fully know, but we can likely assume that he is, as it's not singled out as being a difference. Alternate reality stories tend to enjoy flaunting any differences, as that's, kind of what they're all about. So yeah, Magneto, a Jewish World War II survivor, a Holocaust survivor, and Red Skull, an established German World War II soldier, team up to take out Reed Richards in this story, which is admittedly pretty dark, because that's not a thing you'd think Magneto would do normally. Number 4. X-Sentinels. One of the stories in X-Men Millennial Visions tells us of how over time, as the X-Men and other mutants like Magneto aged, they slowly transitioned to become cyborgs, until they were just full-on robots, with their consciousness just downloaded into their cyber bodies. As time went on, their mental faculties began to break down due to the overload of information over time, basically causing their brains to kind of short circuit. All they could remember clearly was their mission to protect mutant kind. Clinging on to this last principle, the cyborg mutants become X-Sentinels, who instead of hunting down mutants, would hunt down and exterminate humans. So in a way, they became their own worst enemy. Number 3. X-Men films. What we know of Eric's past in the X-Men films is enough to convince you just how dark of a character and story he saw there. Eric was Jewish and living in Germany with his family during World War II. As a young boy, his powers started to manifest, but not strong or soon enough to save his family from being put into concentration camps. He was studied by a doctor who was allied with the Germans, a man we'd come to know as the famous Sebastian Shaw. And when Eric could not perform one of the tests that Shaw gave him, Shaw murdered his mother in front of him, hoping that the rage would help to unlock the full potential of Eric's powers. This is also the reality where much later on Eric would settle down and start a family. Eric was married and he and his wife had a daughter together, following his adventures in the film Days of Future Past. Unfortunately, after coworkers discovered that Eric is actually Magneto, witnessing his powers, he ends up being apprehended by the Polish authorities, who accidentally kill his family when his daughter's mutant powers begin to manifest. Yikes. Poor Magneto. Number 2. Days of Future Past, but the comic book version. Magneto from the alternate reality of Earth 811 has a pretty bleak life after the Sentinels take over the country. At first free from the mutant concentration camps, Magneto is aiming to find his daughter Scarlet Witch, who has gone missing. When Wolverine, Jubilee, and Magneto do find her, they discover she's being held prisoner and used as a weapon by the Hellfire Club. They free her, but she ends up dying anyways, and during the fight, the bones in Magneto's legs are completely shattered, leaving him unable to walk. When finally captured by the Sentinels and placed in a mutant concentration camp, which you think would be hard enough for the poor man, he ends up sacrificing his life to help the X-Men and Franklin Richards escape, so they can hopefully follow through with their plan to alter reality and avoid this whole apocalyptic fate. Number 1. Ultimate Magneto. Magneto in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610 is the most extreme and the most dark, like many other Ultimate versions. This is the reality where both Magneto and Xavier, when they first meet, decide that mutant kind is meant to replace humankind and form the Brotherhood. Here, a young Eric also kills his father when his powers first manifest, though in his defense, his father was trying to shoot him dead at the time. Eric instinctively causes the bullet to turn back around on his father, fatally wounding him with the reversed gunshot. This is also the reality where when some refused to join Magneto in his cause, he simply responded by killing them. During Ultimatum, his severe stance on how to best deal with the oppression of mutant kind caused him to kill millions of people, including his former friend Xavier. He snapped Xavier's neck and also killed other famous X-Men including Beast and Nightcrawler.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Wild West themed Xavier Gang. In an alternate Marvel universe that bears an incredible resemblance to America in the 1800s, a band of outlaws known as the Xavier Gang are plaguing a small town in Arizona, with every mutant member of the team being individually mind-controlled by a distant and diabolical version of Professor Charles Xavier. Using this team of the X-Men as puppets made up of both superheroes and supervillains, this Western crook version of Xavier was only defeated once a multiverse-spanning team of X-Men showed up to put an end to his mind-controlling ways. Coming in at number 8, we have perhaps the most infamous X-Men palette swap with Dark Beast. Originally hailing from the alternate timeline known as the Age of Apocalypse, this version of Hank McCoy was a twisted mad scientist working under the tutelage of Mr. Sinister, striving to create the most powerful mutants possible, no matter the cost. Although this messed up future would be prevented by the X-Men, Dark Beast was wily enough to find a way into the main Marvel universe and avoid his existence being erased. Ever since, he's been a persistent thorn in the X-Men's side and a particular burden on Beast, who would much rather that someone didn't use his genius for evil. Coming in at number 6, we have the infamous Zombie Wolverine. Many superheroes and villains of the Marvel Universe found themselves infected with an undead plague on the alternate world of Earth 2149, but Wolverine might be the character who experienced the oddest side effects from becoming a member of the Zombie Legion. Initially fighting alongside Magneto to help defeat the undead threat with the X-Men, Wolverine was eventually bitten and overwhelmed while attempting to defend Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s main base of operations. Turning against Magneto, this version of Wolverine slowly discovered his healing factor was affected by his zombification, meaning his arms could no longer support the adamantium claws throughout his body. Attacking any living thing he could with the shreds that remained of his limbs, this version of Wolverine would go on to even consume Galactus, becoming a cosmic undead threat to the rest of this very doomed Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 5, we have the villainous Wolverine of an alternate future, Saberclaw. Hailing from Earth 982, this son of Wolverine and an unknown woman absolutely hates his original father, so much so that it seems to have literally changed him into appearing more reminiscent of Sabretooth than his actual dad. Wearing adamantium sheaths on his bone claws to make them even deadlier, Saberclaw was briefly a member of this universe's Sinister Six before eventually being convinced to put his differences aside with his father and help defend the world from the threat of Galactus and the daughter of Loki. Just another day in complicated comic book family dynamics. Coming in at number 4, we have Daken, the dark son of Wolverine. Named after the Japanese term for mongrel dog, Daken is the tragic child that Wolverine never knew about, his mother being murdered before Wolverine even knew he had a kid. Cut from his mother's body, Daken was raised to hate his father, and in their very first encounter, slashed open his stomach and left him to die. With the same incredible healing abilities and bone claws as his dad, Daken has had a long road of trying to find his proper place in the world and has fought on the sides of both good and evil over the course of his tragic life, but hopefully he'll stay more on the side of good going forward. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, known fittingly enough as Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men ever had to face. Coming in at number 2, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Magneto might often be an enemy of the X-Men, but in recent years has allied himself with them more often than not. This version of Magneto, however, is much more cynical and dark than the more complex figure of the regular Marvel Universe. And when he believed his children had been killed by Doctor Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. Switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast directly to the head. And finally, coming to our top spot, we have another version of Professor Charles Xavier, or more specifically, the part of his mind known as Onslaught. For years, Professor X has done all he can to achieve peace and prosperity for mutant kind, while not allowing his anger at humanity to get the better of him. But after all this time of psychically repressing every dark and evil thought he ever had, Xavier had made the perfect ticking time bomb. And when he briefly had a mental battle with his best frenemy, Magneto, a portion of Magneto's less held back personality combined with all of the darkness in Xavier's heart and created one of the most dangerous psychic creations of all time, the villain known as Onslaught. A personality made up of the worst possible versions of both Professor X and Magneto, Onslaught is the pinnacle of what can happen when the X-Men go bad.
Number 10, Cyclops and Wolverine's Schism. Schism was basically Wolverine and Cyclops fighting over ideologies, particularly ideologies surrounding the young mutants' minds that they were subjecting to danger literally all the time. Wolverine believed in a more nurturing parental approach, while Cyclops had the idea to treat these youngins like soldiers. Cyclops' approach is bad enough, but the whole initiation of this fight was another low for the mutant Boy Scout. Cyclops founded Utopia, giving mutants a place to live, but a place that was now being threatened by a new Hellfire Club that attacked a group of young X-Men at a museum opening, taking hostages. Cyclops and Wolverine were racing to get there, but were too slow, so, to Wolverine's horror, Cyclops ordered teenage mutant Oya to de-life all the Hellfire soldiers, which she did successfully. The fight between Cyclops and Wolverine then split the mutant community down the middle. Number 9, X-Men vs. Inhumans. The Inhumans were an offshoot of humanity that were experimented on by the Kree, gaining powers from a process called Terrigenesis, using Terrigen mists. Now it turns out, these mists are basically poisonous to the mutant population, and mutants were hurt when mists were released on Earth. The Inhumans in response felt pretty bad and were all for some kind of peaceful resolution to the issue. But Emma Frost made a whole plan that all the mutants, including the X-Men, agreed to except for Beast, Forge, and Rogue. Emma also basically staged the passing of Cyclops at the hands of Black Bolt of the Inhumans to get the mutants to fight back against the Inhumans, who weren't even trying to fight in the first place, causing a whole war between the two groups. It makes no sense, but that's how it is, I guess. If you guys love mutants and these videos, be sure to drop a quick like on this video. It's all you gotta do to show us your support. Thanks, nerds. Number 8, Danger. While working to upgrade the Danger Room by installing Shi'ar technology one night, the Danger Room spoke to Professor Xavier and asked, "Where am I?" Realizing that the Danger Room had mutated and become alive, but still needing to train his X-Men, Professor Xavier made the choice to just ignore and hide the life form from his X-Men. Not smart, since later, the Danger Room began to control other machines in an attempt to gain a body. After sending an Omega Sentinel to battle the X-Men, the Danger Room convinced a student at the school, Wing, to de-life himself, which resulted in the breaking of its prime directive and the physical manifestation of the being named Danger, taking on a female appearance. After locking all of the students in a nightmarish simulation, Danger battled and defeated the X-Men, then went on to do a whole bunch of much worse things herself.
Number 7, Caliban. An albino mutant and a former member of the Morlocks, Caliban made his first comic book appearance in Uncanny X-Men 148. He has the ability to track down any mutant, and he actually sacrifices himself in Logan, where he was played by the hilarious Stephen Merchant. Great film. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's on Disney Plus now, rated R. So good. He was originally an ally to the X-Men, so I'm gonna count him as a hero who switched over to the dark side. Because once he became a tracker for Apocalypse in X-Factor issue 24, titled The Fall of Mutants. So Apocalypse gave him extra strength and renamed him Hellhound, taking the place of the Horseman Death. Number 6. Gazer. Making his first debut in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 169, Gazer met the X-Men when a Golgotha invasion was threatening Earth. He was alone on a NASA space station, and due to his mutant abilities, he was the only person that could withstand high levels of radiation. So when these creatures approached Earth, he told Emma Frost, and then the X-Men joined him in space on his observation platform. Again, he wasn't knighted with a sword and deemed an official X-Men or anything like that, no. But he's a mutant who works in space to keep our planet safe, and he calls Emma Frost. So call him what you want, but this man's a hero. He's a bored, lonely hero up in space. He's definitely an X-Men. I'll say he's an X-Men. But then after the events of M-Day, things changed, and so did his morals. He lost his abilities, so now he was experiencing horrible radiation sickness, so he decided to literally jump ship, wanting to go out there instead of passing away alone in here. Fair, I mean, sad, but also makes a lick of sense. It's kind of like George Clooney in Gravity, just floating out in space.
Houston, I lost visual of Dr. Stone.
But while he was drifting in space like a hero, Apocalypse came on by to save his day, thus becoming the Horseman War. Number 5, Sunfire. He made his first debut in X-Men issue 64. Shiro Yashida's mother passed away of radiation poisoning when he was still young, and Shiro was raised by his uncle Tomo to hate the West and return to Japan to their imperial days. So he trained for years and attacked America when the X-Men pulled up to put a stop to it. So Sunfire ended up taking out his uncle and returning to Japan, but then he was sent to destroy an American cargo ship, but then Namor turned him for good. Now he was Japan's protector. When most of the X-Men were captured by Krakoa, Sunfire was recruited by Charles to help. He was named as one of the mythical 12, representing the power of nature alongside Storm and Iceman. So far, so good. But then during a battle with Deathstrike later on, he was presumed dead after an altercation, and the X-Men couldn't find his body. But you know who did? Apocalypse. Yep. He was turning him into the Horseman Famine, and he kind of had control over it, kind of. See, he wanted to stay and see if he could help out Gazer, who I'd previously mentioned up there, but they were sadly both turned by the end of the day. At least he tried. Number 4, Forge. Forge is a mutant and a tribal shaman who made his debut in Uncanny X-Men 184. He's known for creating these amazing inventions, and before he worked for the X-Men, he was fighting in the Vietnam War, where he would use dark magic to save himself. He rejected the life of a shaman in order to serve. He was able to create advanced cybernetic prosthetics to replace his missing limbs during all these battles. And then after the events of M-Day, Forge searched the multiverse to try and find other mutants. Then there was an alternate world of mutants at war with a group of artificial mutants that were created by Forge. So he was bad. He's a bad guy in another world. Brilliant mind, but it can get him into a little bit of trouble in some of these stories, especially the Ultimate Universe, where he literally sided with Magneto. And during this, he actually created a power amplifier for Magneto to use in order to flip the Earth's magnetic poles and take out every living being on the planet. So thanks, Forge. Really cool. You couldn't have made like an iPhone 14. Cool, that's good too.
Number 3, Professor X Mindwipe Mark II. It's not just colleagues that Professor X has manipulated. No sir, not by a long shot. But in Giant Size X-Men number 1, Charles Xavier has to put together a brand new X-Men team thanks to the fact that his original X group is being held captive by the living island Krakoa. However, we learn later that this new team wasn't the only one, because Professor X already sent out another new squad of X-Men to save his original team, and they were all horribly killed. Vulcan, Sway, Darwin, and Petra all seem to perish at the hands of Krakoa, and rather than admit his poor decision making, getting a bunch of mutants killed in action, Charles erases the minds of everyone who knew about this team, including Vulcan's older brother, Cyclops, which came and bit him in the butt when Vulcan turned out to be alive and came for some revenge. Number 2, Beast and Terra Verde. After the mutant nation of Krakoa was founded with its various different organizations and groups, the former X-Men Hank McCoy was put in charge of the intelligence wing of X-Force, which was the mutant nation's equivalent to something like the CIA, for example. This means that Beast is now one of the shadiest damn mutants you ever did see, and one of the most prominent examples of just how shady he now is comes in his response to an attack from the Republic of Terra Verde. Beast modifies the telefloronic biotech of the country of Terra Verde to take complete control of that country and its people. From there, he used them to seed telefloronic listening devices in embassies and basically used the state as a puppet for intel gathering. Hank transformed the nation into a literal puppet state and robbed its people of their free will. And in at number 1 is the secret of mutant resurrection. This one is gonna split a few people, and I'm kind of even on the fence about this one. Basically, if you don't know, in recent comics, mutants on their new nation of Krakoa have devised a means of resurrecting their own using a group of 5 mutants known, surprisingly, as the Five. Resurrection in comic books happens on an almost absurd basis, but this proven method of consistently bringing back the dead is different, and the mutants are very aware of that fact and even go to great lengths to keep it a secret from the rest of the world. The reason kinda makes sense, as 1, they can't really bring back non-mutants anyways, and 2, the amount of people who would be outraged at the fact that the mutants are allowed to revive themselves but us regular humans have to suffer through all the pain and loss of losing a loved one and can't do anything about it, it would just cause mass outrage and further turn the world against mutants. Still, devising the means for resurrection and not even trying to inform the world? Kinda hella sus.